Joining us now, State Senator, Democrat, Fairfax, Scott Surovell. Boy, he's got a spring in his step. Democrats are really excited about this session coming up in Richmond. Yes, we'll be talking about Maryland pretty soon. Right now, Richmond, though. Scott Surovell, State Senator, good to have you with us, man.
Good to be with you, John. A little depressed after yesterday's game, but happy about what happened a couple weeks ago.
Well, I tell you what, I've said this earlier. I'm not a Redskins fan, but I'm not an anti-fan either. I mean, I watch their games. I mean, they're in the market. They're on TV. And so many of my friends like yourself are such diehard Redskins fans. I really felt sorry for you guys yesterday and the team because, I mean, my goodness, a 15-point lead with 3.5 minutes to go. I mean, you're simply not supposed to lose that game. No way.
No, Troy Aikman called it. Troy Aikman, I think when the Skins got their last touchdown, said that, game over, backbreaker, whatever. I was about ready to turn the TV off. And by 4 p.m., I was like, sucking on a keg like it was a baby bottle.
Wow. Unbelievable. I mean, the last two drives by New Orleans, I don't think Washington stopped the play. Did they?
No, they went to this prevent defense for the last two sets with a Hall of Fame quarterback. I mean, I don't know what they were thinking, why they just didn't stick with what got them there. But, there's a million different things. The play calling was bad. I could analyze it to death. It's just par for the course.
Well, it was a backbreaker because now to get to the playoffs, right, you got to get 10 wins. You got to run the table. You got to win 6 in a row. So, but just a heartbreaking defeat. And I tell you, when the Saints got the ball back, down by 8 with 1:38 to go, I mean, 3 plays they had a touchdown. 3 plays. Unbelievable. It's just, I mean, how does that happen? And the thing is, they had put pressure on Drew Brees all game. They had him running around back there. They had pressure on him the whole game. And then, like you say, they go into this, prevent defense, play not to lose, and he just lit them up like a pinball machine on Christmas Day. Unbelievable.
No, well, the clock management, the play calling, the mistakes. I mean, they gave up a field goal in the first half on a false start. I mean, the mistakes just come back every time. So I'm giving up my season tickets next year. I think I'm definitely not going on Thanksgiving.
Really? Thanksgiving, and they're playing on Thanksgiving evening, right? Thanksgiving night. You're not going?
Yeah. No, I'm not. I can't justify investing my time in that instead of hanging out with my family. When there's nothing to play for and against the Giants of all things.
Yeah, against the Giants.
I can't justify it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, the season's up. Well, you gotta run the table.
I just don't think it's happening this year. I called at the beginning of the season. I think I told you 5 wins or something, and Chap told me I was crazy.
He did. You said 5 wins. Yeah, Chap said 10 wins playoffs. You said 5. Right now, you're right. They're 4-6, right? They got to win another game. All right, Scott Surovell, State Senator. Let's get to your overwhelming victory on Tuesday in Virginia, November 7th. The Democrats winning everything. You got a shot at the speakership of the House, depending on how these recounts turn out. How do you see that shaping up?
Well, I'm pretty optimistic about the Yancey recount. I mean, I haven't studied it personally, but my good friend and your friend Ben Tribbett tells me that in the AG recount, I think the Democrats picked up like 30 or 40 votes,
right,
4 years ago there,
yes.
and so I think they're probably heading to 50-50. The situation in the speaker seat is a little concerning in terms of the possibility that people were handed out ballots in the wrong precinct, but I think that's highly unlikely. I think it would really surprise me that after 8 years, nobody figured out they were voting in the wrong precinct. And I doubt they could make it up on the recount. It's theoretically possible, but I think highly unlikely. But I think we're heading towards 50-50 in the House come January. But then, we also just have no idea who might get picked off in the governor's cabinet, and that could throw a lot more uncertainty to this whole thing as well that I don't think a lot of people are really thinking through all the way. So,
right.
There's a lot of dominoes still to go down before January 10 when we gavel in.
Senator Surovell, explain when you say picked off in the House so everybody understands. Jim Gilmore, as a Republican, did this when it was close. So let's say it's 50-50. Explain how picking off somebody in the House would work into the cabinet. Just walk us through that. so everybody understands it.
Well, it's not just the House. I mean, a senator could take an administration appointment as well. But Governor-elect Northam needs to fill some positions in his administration. They don't even have to be cabinet positions, but a lot of times you'll see members that will hop off and take a job with an administration because under our old pension system, your pension is calculated based on your high 3 or now 5 years under the middle system, and so you can get a nice kick on your retirement. And so a lot of guys at the end of their legislative career will take an administrative job to goose their pension a little bit. And Gilmore picked off, I think it was Dave Brickley, a Democrat from Prince William, made him director of parks, the state park system. Mm-hmm. That flipped control of the legislature back in '99. I think they also got Senator Waddell to go, which flipped the Senate at one point. I can't remember what year that was. It might have been like '01. Mm-hmm. And so that happens. And the curious thing about this year is that because it's 50-50, what's really key is who has the majority of votes when they gavel in on January the 10th. And so it could even be like 49-48 or 50-49. But whoever's got the majority when they walk in that day can elect a speaker who then appoints the committees. And the speaker can only be undone with a 2/3 vote. So it doesn't matter if somebody makes it up and even goes over the majority after that. As long as they've got the majority on January 10 when they gavel in, game over on the speaker's position.
So just so everybody understands, so let's say the House of Delegates is 50-50. Governor-elect Northam can take a Republican and put him in his administration. They accept the job. They resign. The seat is open. The speaker right now, which is Speaker Howell, he's still the speaker now. He would call for a special election in January 30th or whatever, pick a date. But meantime, when you convened on January 10th, the Democrats would have that 50-49 advantage. David Toscano or some Democrat would be elected speaker. He would appoint all the committees. And then even if the Republicans did win that special, it wouldn't matter because that can't get undone without 2/3, right? Is that the way it works?
You have most of that right. The only part that I think you're inaccurate on is that the governor, I think, calls the special election date before we gavel in. If vacancy happens after we gavel in, then the speaker calls the House date, or the Senate Rules Chairman, I think, calls the Senate date. But that's after we gavel in.
All right, so before you gavel in, the governor would, right? So Governor McAuliffe, he would do that then, right? Okay, so that's how that would work. That makes sense. Let's get to a couple things that have been held up with Republicans being in control that might be different, and I'm going to run through them because there's going to be a lot of changes. Let's start with one of my favorite topics, casino gambling in Virginia, right? Which Bill Howell on my show 3 years ago said, not over my cold, dead body. Well, he's out. Toscano might be the speaker or not, but is this real now?
That's one I haven't heard mentioned yet, but that's actually very interesting. And I can tell you, I'm a supporter of it. I mean, I've co-sponsored legislation with Senator Lucas to try and encourage casino gambling in Hampton Roads area. I've seen what MGM has done up our way, right across the river from my district in Maryland. I mean, they're sucking $200-300 million a year out of our state, of Virginia taxpayer dollars. But I don't know. I mean, that bill didn't get out of the Senate last time, and I don't know if that's because people thought it would die in the House and they just didn't want to deal with it or what. But I think there's definitely some possibilities now. Speaker Howell is totally opposed to that, adamantly opposed to it, but I haven't talked it around. But, that could have some possibilities. It hadn't even occurred to me.
What about the Redskins coming to Richmond?
You'd be surprised. To Loudon, you mean? Or
yeah, Loudon.
Okay, Loudon. Yeah, you'd be surprised how much concern there is about taxpayers funding a stadium. I don't know how that's going to play out. Governor McAuliffe has made a lot of noise about it, but he's never really proposed anything specific. And I've had a lot of fellow Democrats I know comment to me that they're concerned about the taxpayer side of it. You know, I mean, when Wilder tried it back in '91, there was a lot of hostility to it.
Right.
But of course, that was a really bad budget year when they did it. But I'm not as concerned about. I don't think the name would be as much of an issue as it would be the actual cost for a very unpopular team. I mean, I wish the team was.
Because this is probably a bad day to ask you that question after the heart-stopping defeat, heart-churning defeat they had yesterday in Louisiana. Probably not the best day. Scott, what are some of the? Give me like a rundown, or our audience have a rundown of the top 3 or 4 things that are going to be different. Like, for instance, could you get Medicaid expansion through? That would be one.
Yeah, and I think Medicaid expansion is the number one thing on the list, and I think that's the most likely thing to change. You know, that the votes I think are there in the Senate, as long as Senator Hanger hasn't changed his position. And we talked about it actually at the last Senate retreat we had about some major Medicaid reforms. I mean, basically, I think there's a lot of feeling that the entire program needs to get redone. In addition to that, in terms of the House, if the House goes 50-50 or even 51-49, I think there's probably some Republicans that would cross over to support it, whose districts are really in desperate need for health care.
I agree.
So I think that's likely to happen. It might there'll be a negotiation, and there'll be some dances about it, but I think that's likely to go. I think other changes. I think you're likely to see the misdemeanor felony threshold change in Virginia finally after 15 years. We have the lowest threshold between misdemeanors and felonies in the United States of America. There's been bipartisan support for that in the past. We've passed it out of the Senate like 5 times now. It always dies in House courts. So I think that's likely to go. I'm hopeful that there's that people are consistent about where they stood on nonpartisan redistricting, and that we can actually have a real discussion about that for once. I mean, given where the things are in the numbers finally, I think there's exposure on both sides for everybody on this stuff. And there's a lot of people that have taken the position that they support it. And now that votes might actually matter, I hope they stick with it. I intend to, because this is just the right thing to do. And so I'm hopeful that might happen, although I think that requires a constitutional amendment. We don't really consider those until next session, not this one.
Right.
So those are the 3 big ones that I see changing.
Well, I think you're right about Medicaid expansion. I think it's going to be a very difficult argument to stop that from happening now, especially because Obamacare couldn't get repealed or replaced. You might as well take the money from the federal government. I've changed my position on it, as everyone knows. Obamacare is here to stay. The Republicans couldn't repeal it or replace it because they went back home, raised money off it, didn't have a plan, and lied. Now, as far as I'm concerned, you might as well take the money from the federal government. It's going to get paid out to somebody. I don't see why it shouldn't come to Virginia. We've already lost billions of dollars. This thing is not going away. So I know that my conservative friends are going to argue that it's a budget buster and that it could possibly implode the Virginia economy. But that's only if you get repealed and replaced. I don't see it happening. Coupled with the fact that on the only repeal and replace bill that they had that could have passed, the Medicaid expansion for the states that had taken the money stayed in. So it didn't make any sense. So I think you're going to get that done. I don't think there's any question there because if you get Hanger, you got what, right? 2020 in the Senate.
Tie break.
And you got the tiebreaker there.
Actually, it takes if you get Hanger, I think you need more than Hanger because I don't think the lieutenant governor can vote on the budget if it's in the budget.
It could be deadlocked to 2020.
Yeah, but I think there's somebody else. I'm trying to remember.
You're going to pick somebody else up
before, and I can't remember that.
Look, they see the handwriting. Look, they see the handwriting on the wall, right? Everyone now in a swing district is looking at 2019, extrapolating the results of 2017, and seeing that their seats are at risk, from Frank Wagner to Dick Black on down. So, somebody's going to make a political decision, right? No question. So I think that happens. That's going to be the number one thing. What about I've got another minute, Scott Surovell. What about the difference in mood now in the upcoming 2018 General Assembly? What is going to be the biggest difference?
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. I mean, one of the things I noticed when I came over from the House to the Senate is the Senate tends to be much more collaborative and less sort of mercenary, and that's because we're so close. We have to get along with each other and work together on a lot of stuff. We need each other all the time. And before this election, there was a lot of anger in the House about the ads and the money that was getting thrown around, and there was a lot of people that were sort of threatening mayhem. But in a 50-50 body, you can't make enemies on a daily basis, or else you'll be completely ineffective. And I think you're going to see a whole different mood in the House of Delegates, probably less conflict, confrontation, more getting along. That's just my guess. It's not really typically in the spirit of the body. The House tends to be more sort of rowdy and partisan and political, but in a 50-50 environment, you can't afford to be putting your fingers in people's eyes. It's just, you'll never get anything done for yourself or for your people if that's the way you operate. So I would not be surprised if things are very different there in terms of the tone and the mood.
All right.
Also, by the way, Ralph Northam, I think, has a whole different relationship with the legislature than Governor McAuliffe did, and I think that'll change things as well. I
agree. We're out of time. I want to thank State Senator Scott Surovell, Democrat from Northern Virginia, from the Fairfax area. He's in leadership in the state Senate. They are in a 21-19 majority. But like Scott Surovell says, somebody could get offered a very nice job in the Ralph Northam administration that could flip the seat. And then who knows? They could be back in control. We'll have to wait and see what happens. Scott, thanks for being with us, man.